only your home, but a permanent place. And we said we have to determine as believers to remain in our permanent place of peace, our permanent place of also being positioned to receive what God has for us, and our permanent place of also ensuring we praise Him even in the midst of a storm. In the midst of Reconciled, it's actually bringing agreement to one another. And so what I want to share today, and want to make sure I love this portion of Scripture that we're going to talk about today, and I want to link it with what we shared last week as well. So the question is, how many believers have had old habits, behaviors, habits, and thoughts that we no longer want in our lives? Amen. Amen. Two hands up. Amen. So the question really is, if we know we have behaviors, and we know we have habits, and we know we have thoughts that we really don't want to be a part of our lives, that should not be a part of our lives, the real question is how do we get rid of them? How do we find ourselves, according to the Word, getting rid of, removing these old behaviors, these old habits, and these old thoughts that we still have in our minds? So let's connect this to what we talked about last week. Last week we talked about how are we able to always rejoice and always have hope. Now, believers, we talked about there are times when we don't feel like rejoicing. Amen. There are times when it feels like hope has left us. And we talked last week about the definition of rejoicing being to be well, to tell about how wonderful God is, to dwell in His presence, but more importantly, it means to excel. Then we talked about this idea of hope. How can we always have hope? Anybody ever had some situation that seemed hopeless in your life? I mean, just hopeless. I mean, where you had no idea. It sucker punched you, it caught you off guard, and you seemed like you didn't have hope. And we spent time looking at our pyramid from last week to talk about how we're able to have hope. And when we find ourselves rejoicing always and always having hope, we can go back and start dealing with these old thoughts, these old habits, and old behaviors. So we start with our pyramid. So you may have this in your notes from last week. We talked about when should we rejoice. And we talked last week about we should rejoice in tribulation. We should rejoice in tribulation. So the very bottom of our pyramid was tribulations. Now we know that is not what the Word or the world would have us do. In the midst of tribulation, the world tells us to go back in and overdose and medication and drugs and sniffing and whatever. But the idea was, the Word says that in the midst of tribulation, we should rejoice. In Romans 5:3, rejoice in tribulation. Rejoice in tribulation. And then we talked about this idea from NLT as well. So tribulation is simply being placed under pressure. We shared last week. Being placed under pressure. Sometimes these old habits, and sometimes these old thoughts, and sometimes these old behaviors put us under pressure. And when somebody's under pressure, that's when you see who they really are. Anybody can be holy right now from 10 o'clock to 11, or maybe 12, depending on how long I preach, on a Sunday morning. But the idea is, what happens when we leave from this place and the saints are not around, and all the pressure comes in, because tribulation, it says, in the midst of being placed under pressure, rejoice. I can rejoice because I know God's with me. I can rejoice because I know I already have the victory. I can rejoice because God has already worked it out, and all I have to do is be positioned to receive what God has already done. In the midst of everything, and this is the imagery we have here, rejoicing under pressure, where it feels like things are just squeezing in on us, and it couldn't get worse, and it seems to get worse. In the midst of that, it says to rejoice. Then we talked about this next one was we talked about, but knowing that tribulation produces what? Perseverance. So tribulation helps me and produces perseverance. That I can't get to perseverance without going through tribulation. As believers, we're trying to skip some steps. But there's some things to learn in the 7th grade I'm going to need to know in the 8th grade. And I can't just go from kindergarten to 8th grade and think I have it. So the idea was, God said, now I got some steps I need you to go through. And I know you don't prefer to go through, but if you really want to get to the optimal point of having hope, after of rejoicing in the midst of tribulation, the tribulation is going to produce, it's going to work out. You're going to see some perseverance. And we talked about this idea of perseverance being next. So perseverance, we said very quickly about way of review. Perseverance, the means complete. Severance means separated. So perseverance is nothing but complete separation, glory, from failure, fear, and fretting. That when I have perseverance, that now what I was fearing, I'm not going to be concerned about that because God's taking care of it. What I was fretting, I know God's already moved. When I was at that point, recognized I was failing, that I already have the victory in Christ. Sometimes when you go through stuff, things that seem to be important, now if you came through on the other side, not important anymore. And so when you go through something, when you know you've been through some tribulation, at that point, and then you get to a point of recognizing that now I can be completely separated from what folk think about me, and completely separated from how I'm trying to please folk, because at this point I know God is the one who brought me through, and all I want to do is please Him now. All I want to do is lift Him up now. So it's necessary to get to perseverance to first start with tribulation. So it says at this point again, we're gonna rejoice in tribulation, because tribulation produces what? Perseverance. And perseverance again is what? Complete separation from failure, fear, and fretting. See, when you know God has brought you through something significant, when something minor comes up, you can go and give Him praise. When you know God has brought you something that should have taken you out, when something little comes up, you know God's already worked it out. But see, if I don't know, remember how wonderful God has been. And I don't think about how good God has been. That when this little thing comes up and take me out, but when I recognize I've been through the fire and I don't smell like smoke, and I've been through the water and I did not drown, at that point I recognize that even though I've been placed under pressure, then I get to a point of recognizing I can have complete separation. Failure and fear and fretting are over there, and I'm completely separated from it. Now that I'm not fearful about being placed under pressure, now I have this complete separation, now I can go to the next part. Tribulation, read this whole thing. We glory in tribulation, knowing that tribulation produces perseverance. And what does perseverance produce? Character. So I can't get to character. See, you don't know somebody's character they've been through something. The character. So tribulations come in. I have this idea of being placed under pressure. And now complete separation from failure and fear and fretting. Now we get to the point of seeing what character is all about. Now, so at this point we talk about character. And we talked last week about that there's a difference between reputation and character. A whole lot of people work on their reputation, but we realize we're working on our character. Yeah. So this idea right here, so read this with me again as a reminder. Be more concerned with your character than your reputation. See what I'm going, because your character is what you really are, while your reputation is merely what others think you are. And people are working on your reputation, trying to convince somebody they are something, when they really are not that at all. The folk you work with, they can put up airs on you for a few hours on them, but the idea, their character, that when the pressure is placed, character is what comes out every time. So then last thing, I love what D.L. Moody says. Read this, please. If I take care of my character, my reputation take care of itself. You don't just give God just a hand clap of praise for that man of God. Have that revelation right there. So instead of be concerned about my reputation, I love it. And if you look at this, the word says, over in Philippians, in the book of Philippians, that Jesus looked at himself as having no reputation. In other words, he was not going to be concerned about what everybody else was thinking. He said, I'm working on, I know that the Father and I are one. And I don't say anything unless the Father told me to say it. And I don't go unless the Father told me to go. So I'm working on this relationship. And if I get this relationship straight with God, this is going to be all right here. Many of us are working more on this relationship. And we end up sacrificing the relationship we have with the Lord. Character is who I am. Reputation is what I want people to think I am. So lastly it says right now, so let's read this whole thing now. We glory in tribulation, knowing that tribulation produces perseverance. Perseverance is what again? Complete separation from failure, fear, and fretting. Perseverance produces character. Character is what? Who I really am. And not what I want other people to think I am. But character will eventually produce what? Hope. Hope. So that's what I hear. So if you want to always have hope, It is impossible to always have hope unless I've been through some tribulation. It's impossible to always have hope unless I'm completely free from my fears and failure and credit. It's impossible to have hope until I really embrace who I am in the Lord. Here's our challenge as believers. We're not clear about who we are in God. Believers, you are the righteousness of God. You are the redeemed of the Lord. The Bible says, "If redeemed of the Lord, say so." Anybody here redeemed, you ought to say so. We are the righteousness of the Lord. We've been raised by God. We have been rich. And so the idea is, so now I know who I am, I can walk in my hope. Can't get to hope unless we have gone through the tribulation. And tribulation is pressure being placed under pressure. Everybody in here has been through some pressure. Everybody in here has been through the fire. Everybody in here has been through some things. And now we have not been through the same thing. But everybody's been through something. And then what happens, so folks get stuck somewhere in this pyramid. Sometimes folks get stuck in Lord, nobody knows something. No, Jesus knows it, all about your trouble. So that I guess what I got from tribulation can get to my perseverance. That at some point I got to be free from always trying to please folks. Galatians 1:10 says, I cannot be a servant of God if I'm always trying to please man. Ooh, I just felt so that. Because man will always want you to do something contrary to what God wants you to do. Now, I'm not condemning folk who are not in church right now, but I could not be outside in the cold right now watching a soccer game when I know I'm supposed to be getting the word of God. I couldn't be right there at the mall. Years ago, you remember that when Christmas was on a Sunday, and all these churches closed up and everything, and the malls opened up, the same folk who didn't go anywhere to church, the first thing over there is J.C. Penney trying to get a sale. Yeah, at some point I got to make up my mind and be clear. It's about saying, no, that I'm going to put God first. He has been too good to me. He brought me from a mighty long way. I know how wonderful he is, and I'm going to put him first in my life and not third, fourth, or 100. At some point, in the midst of this tribulation, God has brought us through them suffering and they're being placed under pressure. So we got to now be free from all the fears and failures and also that point of fretting. And then get to the point of character and then hope. So we talked about, so the hope is, we just talk about strong expectation. I love this. Hope is simply strong, confident expectation. That when I stand on his word, I may not see the manifestation, but I hope according to the word that I will receive what God has promised. So I got some strong expectation that is already done. So now what we have is, so the context of our message today, old behaviors, old habits, old thoughts. Now that I know that I can go through from perseverance and not get stuck there, I can go through tribulation and not get stuck, to tribulation and perseverance and not get stuck. I can have this hope. How do we deal with these old behaviors and these old habits and these old thoughts? Because I'm telling you, the thoughts will come in some strange things. You can be in church sometime. Just think about something like, where did that come from? Like, you can be walking, you can just be like walking down in a supermarket right after church and see somebody pushing a basket and say, what happened if I push it down? These thoughts just come, just like, what is wrong? So how do we get rid of? And so it's not just about the thoughts that's popping through. It's about what we do when the thoughts come in. Don't let the thoughts take root. Don't just plant a seed and put them in there for a while. So the thoughts ought to be fleeting, and some thoughts, some behaviors, and some ideas at that point and habits are not allowed in our lives. But what happens when those behaviors have been a part of us so long? What happens when those habits have been part of us so long? What happens when those thoughts have just gotten embedded and ingrained in our minds? Because right now, looking at folk around here, you never know some of the folk are dealing with some of the bad habits and some of the bad thoughts and some of the old ways of behavior that we're dealing with. So the question is, what do we learn from the Word so we can be free from these old behaviors, old habits, and old thoughts? So here's the question. So let me talk about what has not worked. Let's go through this list. Because now, I would say at some point, you can make a point that every believer at some point has tried to deal with this, the old behaviors and old habits and old thoughts at some point, and not always successful. Amen? Amen. So let's look, what doesn't work? Well, first of all, it doesn't work at this point to always go back in. Some of us have promised ourselves and God We are not going to continue doing the same old things, thinking the same old way, and responding the same old way, and keep on doing it. We